Well, well, well. Another Thursday, a lovely Thursday here in Seattle. For those of you in the know, I am heading into what they'll call the end of my COVID stage. And sadly, I have caught COVID 4 times. Primarily because of my policy of open mouth kisses at role-playing conventions, but no. I'm a frontline guy, and that's what I get. But I'm feeling better. COVID's kind of a weird beast. Hello, David Bolak. Good to see you, friend. Yeah, it's different. Fortunately, I'm all vaccinated and boosted and all that good stuff. But enough about me. Today is a good combo. You know, I had the opportunity to sit and chat with this individual via the TikToks, where he hangs out as Sir Dr. K. I call him Dan, and so can you. It's going to be an interesting combo. I'm looking forward to hearing what the community thinks about this combo and kind of weighing in and sharing their opinions. Without further ado, hey, Dan, good to see you.
Hey, howdy. How are you?
Dan, I'm so good. I'm really great and super stoked that you were able to join today. You know, you are, yeah, so I caught wind of you via the TikToks, and we're working on kind of building our presence in that space, and it can be a bit of a challenge when, 80,000 social media spots, but it is one of the most engaging spaces to sort of check and see, and the TTRPG talk is amazing. Just really good folk. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about you. Tell me why you're on TikTok, and then we'll roll into sort of all things, professional game mastering and beyond.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, I go by Dan. Everyone on the internet, though, I go by Sir Dr. K. Old nickname, long story. But I have been running games and playing games for a good chunk of my life. To some degree, I've always had like a storytelling situation going on in my brain. And it wasn't until probably about 9 years ago or so at this point that I really started to catch the itch of wanting to run games and like be kind of behind the GM screen, and the first game I jumped into was Fantasy Age. I loved it. I thought it was really interesting, thought it was fascinating, and just had a lot of cool options. And really what I loved about it right off the bat was that it was very easy to homebrew things into, which I immediately jumped on. And I've been doing that kind of thing ever since. So now I run and have run regular games in person and remotely online in a bunch of different systems now for like 8 years now, pretty regularly, at least like a couple times a month. So I'm certainly not like your very old head, been in the game for 30 years, but I feel fairly confident that like I've cut my teeth. I know what I'm doing, and I'm very excited to just like do more, because the more I do, the better I feel I am at it.
Yeah, and here's the other thing as well. We are not, neither Dan or I are hanging out here purporting to be the end-all, be-all of TTRPGs, the adventure game engine, professional game mastering, none of that. So, but your experience and your understanding of the space is very much appreciated, and this is a show where we talk about it because we want to learn more, and so that's what it's all about, 100%. Now I'm looking in the chat here, and we've got all of our buddies are here. Duke's hanging out. David Bolak says hi. Faye's here too, and Faye, interestingly enough, says I'm running my professional games at this time, so it's funny that the topic is pro gaming. love talking about it. And also, shout out to V8 Volkswagen, who said game Eastering because somebody forgot an M. That somebody would be me, or E, as it were. Let's see. Jay Gray, the original Link Wizard, is here. Good to see you, friend. Now, Jay, you say something that is interesting, and I want to know more, but Jay says this is a scary topic. Now, I don't want to presume what Jay is thinking, so I'll let him fill in the blanks. But professional game mastering can fall into a kind of an area of it is an area worthy of interrogation. We'll say that. Now, talk to me about your first kind of connecting with that space and what it means to you. David Bodie, good to see you, friend. Glad you're here. But sorry, Dan. Talk to me about your decision to kind of move in that direction, and did you feel at all trepidatious about it?
Yeah, I think to a degree, yeah. Honestly, being involved in TTRPG TikTok and that space, which I just kind of fell into, I've ended up following so many people on there who were talking about great things and great games. So just felt natural for me to like throw in my 2 cents and start,
Sure.
talking to people. And I found out that a lot of them had dipped their toes in or had been doing pro games for who knows how long. I saw the tools that they were using. I saw the ideas that they were coming up with for their professional games. And a lot of them would tell stories about how what an incredible experience it had been. It gave them
Yeah.
the opportunity to play with people that they probably would never have connected with otherwise.
That is great
Um,
because people can just they can look at who's playing games and pick them in that way, or they can hire someone directly to run a game for them. Or I mean that all of that is very true. That's very interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've also got a lot of systems that people want to play, but the market is a little saturated with just a handful of games. And if you want to play some different games, it gets a little harder to find those people in your area. But
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're not in like a urban population center kind of area.
Sure,
But
sure.
if you go online and you find someone who, like me, is one of the few people that's running Fantasy Age,
Right.
um, and you want to play that game, like that's a great opportunity. And that's why, when I think about when I wanted to start, that was absolutely one of the things that I focused on was like, I want to run those games that I love playing and I love running, but I can't always get a group together for it.
Yeah. Yep.
And so how can I, find ways to find those people elsewhere? And also I think it pushes me to put out a better product, for lack of a better term.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, to kind of polish up with your presentation and work on some of the assets, of course, that you would use to sort of fortify the encounter, and that makes perfect sense to me. And Jay Gray says, "I'm a pro GM because of necessity. I got into it because it takes many hours to run games, and I often have to decide whether or not I can run games or do something to help pay the bills. Due to necessity, over the years, I've had to turn my hobby into a hustle just to justify doing it." 100%, Jay. I'm glad I waited for you to kind of clarify because I was going to dive in and say, let's unpack this. But really, Jay hits the nail on the head for me when it comes to when I see it. Always amazes me, and it always has, even before I got into working professionally in the space. I worked in video games, and working in video games, it is a very clear, measurable. This art, this code, these pieces are worth this much money, and get it out the door to then charge somebody for that. And live as we do in this capitalist society, the reality is the work that goes into even just kind of putting together a just for funsies game is a ton of work with reading materials and many times, I'm not sure about you, but many times that people are working on things for their games, they are running homebrew tables and pulling, all kinds of stuff and really recreating a lot of the stuff. Fantasy Age and really all the adventure game engine games are meant to be sort of have a modular feel to them, so you can kind of take a feature here, move a feature there, and do a lot of that kind of stuff. But it takes a ton of work. When you're preparing for a game that with people that don't know you, it's sort of in that space. What is the prep time, and what are the things you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, Jay, great to your point. I think that's a huge thing for almost everybody I've talked to about it is that idea of, well, I kind of have to, land in a professional space because, you know, I need to afford my life.
Right.
And myself, I'll speak for myself, but I think there are a number of other people who, if I could still have my needs all met and still dedicate a ton of time to just running games for whoever wants to play, I would absolutely do it for free. I'd love that, but life is what it is.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. There's also a very different way from prepping for programs and home games. I know my home tables are going to be very fine with sort of sketched out battle maps, if that's the
Sure.
case. I don't have a token for this thing, so I'm going to throw something else in there that totally doesn't fit the situation. And doing a lot more. I hadn't really thought of that particular thing that you're bringing up. Now, give me like a few minutes for me to like uh, cobble something together out of the lore to make it work.
Right.
I try not to break immersion, of course, still, but those situations do come up sometimes, and I react a lot differently to them in a home game situation. It's more casual. It's more we're all here for just kind of for fun and to hang out. And I think that prepping for a pro game, like I'm putting a lot more work into like what visuals am I putting up when there's not a battle map in front of people on like Roll20 or something like that. I want to
Yeah.
have something else interesting to look at. I want to make sure that I have all of my notes really, really solid. I usually don't take a ton of notes as a DM. I rely on my memory a lot, but when I have to like rely on, make sure that I have everything in its proper place so that when the party comes to it and I'm in a pro GM capacity, I want to make sure that like I'm delivering on exactly that. So I think it is different. It's kind of for me just sort of more than I would normally do. If I
Hmm.
would normally put 30 minutes into a home game prep session, I might put an hour and 30 minutes into a pro game prep session. It's not exactly a one-to-one, but I do think like
Sure.
just a little more effort goes into it on my part to make sure that I'm presenting myself and the game in a way that's really going to be satisfying.
Yeah, absolutely. And well said, all of that. Thank you for kind of diving into that. I think the other thing that's kind of interesting when you look at the pricing, what people are charging. So I've seen people charge as much as 50, and you charge like $12, I think I saw.
I mean, I'm still kind of getting into the space and figuring out what that model feels like. Um, I want to make sure I feel approachable as well. I think that's one of those things. It's in the gig economy that self-priced and stuff like that. You want to be
Yes.
approachable, but you also want to value yourself properly. For getting into it, I'm looking to kind of offset the effort cost a little bit, but also just kind of get a feel for what the atmosphere is. This is a new platform for me to
Yeah.
start playing games. But I know a guy through TikTok who has incredible visuals, spends a ton of time on these things, does a lot of homebrew mechanics, a lot of work goes into his games. And he charges, I think, $20 or $25 per person per session, which does seem steep. But when I've seen the product that he puts out, to me, it's 100% worth it because this is a campaign that's going to go. It's not going to fizzle out like a home campaign might, right? You're paying for it, so like there's going to be something there
Right.
for you to consume, and
Sure.
also you're getting just so much clear work has been put into making sure this is a great story and a great experience. And I think that's worth it.
I do too. I think it's worth it, but I think that there's another aspect of this that is pro consumer, and the notion that when somebody is wanting to play D&D inspired TTRPGs, whether you're no matter what you're running, it there's some overhead. You've got the books and all those things, and the great challenge to getting a good solid session together is scheduling and proximity and all of that stuff. And the other thing as well is, will folks, are they able to follow through? Are they able, that piece of it is certainly a big part of it. But the other piece as well is you can look and see how a person's received. How have they done? The best storytellers can do a lot with very little. And those folks are definitely treasures. And the addition of some of the digital things that people can do to improve the experience is fun. Kind of moving it a little closer to the whole world that it birthed originally, which are video games. So it's sort of it's an interesting kind of push and pull, and ironically, I guess, as it relates to why this is kind of seeing like a big surge in interest and participation is COVID. It really pushed that, folks have tried to find a new way to do the thing that they love, which opened the door for a lot of this stuff. Commando has a really interesting question. Do you feel you have to do the extra voices and all of that because it's a pro stream?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the personally. When it comes to the actual like role play aspect, if I'm in it, if I'm immersed, I do that kind of stuff naturally.
Right.
Even with my home games. So I don't feel like I have to do that part as an extra part. For me, that's the part that's just fun. That you just let that roll, and that's just a good time.
So people would get that if they paid for it or not.
Yeah, with me at least.
Right.
Can't speak for everybody, obviously.
Fair enough.
But I do think, there are other things that I think my home games don't get that I bring into pro games. There's also things that home games get that the pro games don't. I'll say that too. I think that that's also valid. It's that casual relationship. To a degree, it's that element of start playing games has a lot of play by post sort of games, which are sort of asynchronous. Don't necessarily have a set schedule. But for me, I'm scheduling out games. I'm scheduling out, 2 to 4 hours. Plus, what prep time I'm doing is kind of outside of that and sort of rolled into it. But I'm not having a lot of like one-on-one conversations with the players to like nail down lore or discuss like the finer points of their backstory in the way that I do with a home game group.
Oh, interesting.
Like,
so
we'll just chat, like I'll have the group chat for a home game going, and we'll just talk about here's what's going through my character's brain at this point, and I'll respond, and we can kind of do this sort of constant game experience. That for me is just like, then I just get to have fun, right? There's not a lot of effort put into it. But I think with a pro game, I do want to have like some more boundaries, and also I can't necessarily dedicate that energy to multiple professional games at the same level that I can. Games, right?
Yeah. That's that is a really good point as well. And one of the questions that I have about, do you do a session 0 in a pro game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the game. Some games are built to have that kind of thing. So I just started a Titan's Grave campaign.
I saw that.
Which we just did session 0 for to get the kind of baseline understanding. But I do think, because you're talking about a game where potentially people can come in and out a little bit. You also might have to do a little bit of like mini session 0, sort of like, just getting the information to a new player and bringing them in sort of separately. But there are other games like I've been planning some other things, and something like Kids on Bikes isn't really built to have a session 0. It's built to be a sort of shorter thing already. So it kind of, I think, depends, but I do think for these like larger campaigns that are like supposed to be these big stories with hopefully a lot of sessions, I would always want to do a session 0 just to kind of get a baseline understanding of like who's the group that's coming to this,
Right.
how can I serve them well, and how can this game give them what they're hoping to get out of it.
That's right. Yeah, and I'm imagining that there are, we've seen in sort of the ongoing culture war that people will kind of come with their whole sort of definition of woke versus whatever. We don't really get into that here, outside of to say that gaming's for everybody, and we want to make sure that people feel comfortable around the table, and that's a commitment that we just do reflexively and will continue to do. But it's nice to get to know these strangers that you're going to be spending some quality time with.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, real quick, I want to say hey to Cloud. Good to see you, my friend. Seems like it was only just yesterday that we hung out. The great Rafiki's here as well. Good to see you, friend. Looking at our questions here. Now, Claude is talking about he's just getting his profile ready to go so he can start some of the pay-to-play gaming sites. And there is a question that I thought was kind of interesting, just to clarify definitions. Now, this is when I say pro game master or game Easter, whatever you saw first. It is, for me, the definition is someone wherein they're getting paid by the participants to, explicitly they are there because they're paid. That's what I identify as a pro GM. And does that comport with your sort of vibe on it as well, Dan?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I know people who do that also online, or they do it at like a game store. A local game store will set aside a budget to have like weekly games and pay a handful of GMs to come and run games for their customers.
Right.
So yeah, again, I consider that the same, even though the customers aren't necessarily the ones paying, or maybe it's sort of a combination of both. Either way, if you're walking away with some money in your pocket for the work that you're doing, I think that's the definition for me.
Agreed. And the other thing too that's kind of interesting about this, I'm thinking of just sort of the user experience, is it can be, there's a lot of baggage that comes along with enjoying tabletop role-playing games. And part of that is the vibe that we are all, and this is I'm casting no aspersions, but that we're all hanging out in our home wearing leather armor. We've got our battle axe, and we're roaming the neighborhood, LARPing. Now, listen, if that were possible for me, I might be doing it. But there it can be sort of like I want to learn, but kind of on the DL. Like I want to get exposed to kind of what's going on, and there's nothing. You can watch as many actual plays on YouTube as your eyeballs will allow, and it's different. It hits differently when you're playing, and to be able to kind of have a place where you can build up your confidence in just understanding, what does role play mean? Or would I have to be so theatrical? I have to do all of these things. And the answer is, if you want to, but you just don't know what that feels like until you get into it. And so that strikes me as a benefit as well. And to your point too, if somebody is there, I do think it's important that there be not an admission, but an understanding that the person is being paid, just so people understand it. It's not about a good or a wrong of it. But I think that kind of disclosure is important. And just to be very clear, as part of Green Ronin and me personally, I'm all for it. I think that it serves a very important purpose in sort of getting these people who are, and I've always said this about GMs, and there are some other projects that I work on wherein, it comes true or is demonstrated on the regular. GMs and, tabletop role-playing gamers are the best storytellers in our history as as humanity. You just, as there's no real comparable thing that happens that a person is training regularly on public speaking, training regularly on bits of lore, and just digging through history and everything that you can imagine to build these spaces. And it is sort of an ongoing university for the perfection of storytelling, and it's remarkable, I think. In addition, when you look at what that has afforded, there's a real fine line that gets blurrier and blurrier as the TTRPG industry evolves, and it is the line between who's a player and who is a GM and who is a publisher. the tools have opened up to such a degree that I know that very many people that are really into the Third Stage and some of the other Green Ronin projects that we've got cooking, they're publishing their own stuff, whether it's homebrew or through the Age Creators Alliance, which is our program, or and oftentimes multiple. And so it is really just a testament to the hard work and the skill that is it's really like taking sort of a continuing ed class every time you run a because you certainly put as much work as you would say, I don't know, an important term paper or something, maybe even beyond that. So let me see. We've got some chats here. So Jay Gray says I run up to 4 players max, and the two types of sessions. I only do one shots for the more expensive ones, and then it's a negotiation for campaigns.
Interesting, a negotiation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So I wonder, Jay, do you mean to say that you're sort of like you offer bulk pricing? Is that kind of the idea? And I'll wait till you kind of write that down. And also, the Great Rafiki says, for long-term stuff, session is always good, in my opinion, especially setting expectations and the tone as well as the general idea. Yeah, and boundaries. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that's an important one. Yeah, and I think too, to your point, Dan, I think too that it is a different when you get the professional piece of that. I think people may be more inclined to do less of a session zero with people that they've regularly gamed with, if it's like the next step in the thing. If it's brand new, probably an important group to sort of get to know the boundaries. Somebody asks real quick, David Bullock was asking, soundboard, music, effects, do you wear a costume? Like what are the things that you get it? How do you juice up the whole thing?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't do costumes. Not something I've ever delved into. But yeah, I definitely have music going. There's a couple of really good options for Discord bots specifically. There are ones that you can just pipe your Spotify or your YouTube playlist or whatever straight in. But there is one though that, again, this is the thing, being on TikTok and with all of these people who do professional games, even like people who do high effort level home games, they talk about and they tell me about all of these very cool tools. I have one that's called Kenku FM, which allows you to pipe. You can build out your own playlists in there, and it's got a very easy to use soundboard situation for ambient sounds as well as music. But you can also pipe in external things, Spotify playlists, all that stuff. But it's super user friendly and kind of designed specifically for online TTRPG experiences.
What was the name again?
Kenku FM. That's KENKU FM. As the little raven folk of lore. But
I love it. I see that. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
I love that there are these tools that are coming out specifically for this community, right? There are tools for that are just built out completely for the use of online GMs. Because for 3 years, that's all I've been doing. I very occasionally, get to run an in-person session. But at this point, I started with groups that we were maybe all together at one point, and COVID happens, people move, like you move all over the place. Yes, I see people are dropping Sirenscape in there too. There's a bunch of cool tools that are specifically for this, right? For people who are playing online. It's good to know. I've only used Kenku FM a couple of times. I don't want to dig too much into the
no. That's
But to me, it just it shows that exactly like what you're saying, that the hobby is evolving to more easily include this style of gaming, the online style of gaming, and really recognize it as an equally valid and equally engaging experience. If you use these certain tools, it can be as immersive, or in some ways can have even a leg up on in-person gaming in some ways. Um, and I think that that's really cool because when I started doing online gaming, it was pretty bare bones.
Yes,
There
right.
wasn't a
Yeah,
ton that you could do. It was kind of just like draw out your little maps on your thing and like put some, kind of standard run-of-the-mill
100%.
tokens on there.
Yeah,
And it serves, but it's not that same sort of like thing you can get with like 3D printed maps and all of this crazy stuff. Um, I love them both.
absolutely.
I love both experiences, and I'm just really glad that more is being added to
Yeah.
enhance the experience.
And I think that yeah, Sirenscape, and I dropped that link because they've done audio sort of soundscapes for our game specifically, for Mutants Masterminds and a few others, but there are a lot out there. And one of the things I do love about the community on TikTok is they are the early adopters. Like they are people who will really embrace, sort of innovations in the space. And so I think that that's great. And I think the other thing that's important, and I'm just going to say this again, just in case folks are joining us a little into the convo, this isn't meant to, nor should we advocate for this to replace the way the games are played.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the beauty of this hobby is that it meets you where you are, and so you bring it into your life for as much space as you have for it, and if that includes, bringing a GM to come tackle running a game for you and rowdy kids, and or whatever the case may be, there's certainly a lot of space for that, and I respect it. So here's a question I have for you. There was a question about age groups. So it seemed, if I'm remembering correctly, okay, yeah, so it's Commando. What about age groups? Do you try and keep the groups around a certain age, like 25 to 35, older or younger? You can't really say, like, I will only be accepting players that are 25 years old, like you're an insurance company or something.
I mean, I think if you are doing it at something like a game store, I know some people who do that, and they do run, classically like, what's the it's like the Domains of Dread kind of campaign, these like really horror ones. Sure, you'd probably have an age floor on that, so that you don't have kids there. And for my games that I'm going to be running professionally, for the most part I want to like just kind of go game by game. I am going to reskin Curse of Strahd as a Wild West game, and that's going to be pretty heavy. So we want to probably keep, under 16 to 18 probably out of that one. But if I run this other like sort of lighter hearted, I've got an idea for like a forest animals, maybe a short campaign kind of thing. That could be all ages very easily,
Sure.
Doesn't have to be super crazy or anything like that. I think it's fully a case by case basis. And I think it's the same kind of case by case basis you would use if it was a game with like you and people, if it's like, you and your friends, you might run a different game than it's you and your friends kids.
Right. True.
And both of those could be extremely fun games. I don't think there are wonderful things about like introducing young people into the hobby in ways that are approachable and fun. So that's, I'm doing a sort of learn to play Fantasy H2E on my start playing for a little bit less than I would normally charge, because it's going to be, overview of the rules, pre-generated characters, and then a quick, very small one-shot adventure with like one or two encounters, basically, just to give people into like the vibe of like, how do you play this game and how do you play, TTRPGs in general.
I love it.
And that's the kind of thing that's open to all. I could tune that to be for children, or I could tune that to be for a slightly more adult audience really easily.
Absolutely. I've dropped the link so folks can kind of check that out and get a sense of.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. And I appreciate you for, kind of getting involved in that. Let me make sure I'm doing the right one. It'd be funny if I drop someone else. No, it's you. Yep, there you are. So Dan, when you're looking at stepping into this space, now we got a lot of people who are in chat that are beginning of their journey into sort of
Mhm.
pro GMing, and then there are people who have been doing it for some time. And I love the approach that we're kind of offering tools and chat. They're offering their kind of their structure and what a session, how long a session is, and all that good stuff. Let's
Mhm.
start at zero. You are stepping in. You see start playing games, or one of the other many. They are popping up all over the place.
Mhm.
Also, shout out to Ryan. Good to see you. But what's the process? So you're looking, you sign up, and then you just put together what you want to do. How do they? What do they verify you're a human? Do they? What's that process like?
So for start playing games
Yeah.
specifically, you join to be a GM, um, and then you can set up a game template. Basically, is the sort of beginning part of what you set up. So for me, I've got say the Titans Grave game. I knew I
Yeah.
wanted to run that. So I set up all the necessary information for that. So like, what system is it in? What tools are we going to be using? Is it going to be, through Discord or Zoom or whatever else? I have to give it a bunch of information about what is the tone, the style of the game. What should players expect? That's what's going to be in that listing there. And then um, after that, you submit it, and then they will look at it. They'll look at you. They'll look at the game, make sure it fits and suits the community guidelines, all of that stuff. Make sure that the art that you choose for the sort of uh, uh, front banner of it
Sure. Sure.
isn't copyrighted art. You're allowed to use it. All of this stuff. So
Yeah,
you got
that's
to
a good
make sure
question.
you,
Just
you get your
put
stuff there.
to put a pause in just this moment,
Yeah.
and we'll bookmark here, and we'll come right back to it. But what about licensed music and that kind of stuff? Is that not as much of an issue because of the small group? And are any of these ever streamed?
Yeah, I think that's the thing is if you're streaming it, I think that changes the whole dynamic, right? But
Sure does. Yeah.
personally, I'm not bringing people in to be part of a stream. I'm just
Yeah.
bringing people in to be part of a game. And so I don't have those same concerns. The games that we play are going to be in that moment there, and then they only exist in everybody's memories.
Right. Yeah.
Which is
Exactly.
very
And
different
yeah.
than you're going to record it, or you're going to stream it, or you're going to put it up for a VOD afterwards.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. That
then
makes
those
perfect sense.
considerations are important. But I think the only one for start playing games is that the art that you use needs to be art that you're allowed to use. Um, and I just saw
Yeah.
Claude mention as well in the chat there that Start Playing also has a whole section that you have to go through of like, what safety tools are you using and how are you going to utilize them?
Yes.
So it really does like put that very front and center that like, if there's not an expectation that you use them, there's certainly the idea that like, these are standard. These are things that lots of games need and will use. And I think that's great. I absolutely agree. It's a great emphasis to have, especially because you're playing with a bunch of strangers.
Yes. Right.
Not everybody is going to be coming at their games from the same place. So I think it's really important to respect that.
100%.
Anyway, all of that.
Yeah.
Once you're finished with once you get like approved, once your game template gets looked at and they say that looks good, you can schedule sessions. You
No,
can
that's with a
schedule however
person.
many sessions you want.
Does a person review your submission?
I think it's a person.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure because it's been I've had to wait for a while to hear back that it was
Good. Okay. Yeah.
accepted and stuff.
I say good, not that you had to wait for a while, but there can be
Yeah.
this sort of urge to implement AI measures when handling tasks like that at scale. So I think it's important that a human being have an eyeball on that. So that
Yeah,
makes
I
sense.
think
Yeah.
so. And it also helps for you to get reviews from people you've played with before.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's if you have a different account on somewhere else where you run professional games, if you played for a game store, and your friends, bringing them in to give you reviews, always good. And once you schedule a session or a number of sessions, uh, then it's just about getting the word out, letting people know what your situation is,
Yeah.
and where you are, and how to find you, and what the game's going to be like. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Great. Real quick, I want to jump in with Gray Matters game mastering comment
Mm,
here, and that is, so they said I have a waiver and the Mongoose Gaming with consent form
mhm.
as part of that. Yeah, that makes sense. And then, but oddly, I handle my paid table on my own site, and you know what? I think that is, I. It'll be interesting to kind of see how things develop, but I'm getting the sense as someone who digs around in the world of consumer sentiment and sort of the state of things. You know, there was a time in the past where we agreed to. Oh, Jay Gray, there you are. I see you now. Um, there is a time in the past where we, as both as industries and as consumers, ceded our rights or ceded our sort of content to a third party to kind
Mhm.
of do with as they please. And as we've seen in multiple sort of examples, the latest sort of ongoing, I was going to say slow motion train wreck, but it's really fast forward. It's just a really long train and it keeps crashing and it keeps crashing, but is what's going on with Twitter. And apologies to their brand managers or whomever's in charge there. Elon, I don't care. It's Twitter. But it is to me this space wherein you give over um, a little bit of your money and a little bit of your time and and your all of your content to a third party to do with, and then they can sort of mess it up by being awful people or bad policies. And now that isn't to say that any of these folks like Start Playing Games or any of those folks, that they're clearly there, and you can see it in the way that they present the information and the process so that it's used to kind of vet and get people up to speed, that they care about the experience and they care about people enjoying themselves, and they're not necessarily holding on to your storyline. But I do see at the beginnings of a shift towards more my sites. Like I'm going to have my clicks are coming to me and my, and so that's not unusual. Or I think it will be less unusual moving forward. And that's we'll make a bet with you, Dan, and then we'll talk about settling up later. We'll talk in like 4 months and see what the deal is. But what are
Yeah,
your thoughts on that?
I think you're right. I've heard stories and seen trends of people utilizing a site like Start Playing Games, or like Roll20's digital game sort of marketplace. Um, and I've seen people take that and use that for like getting people into their game, and then they kind of like shut it down and say, okay, everybody, now you're all in my Discord server or my Slack server or whatever,
Yeah.
and we'll be handling all of that payment and stuff like that separately. Um, and you get around the like I think it's like a 10% fee that Start Playing Games takes.
Yeah, and
You
also
get
the overhead
around
of yeah.
mhm. You get around some of that other stuff. I think for if you're starting out, if it's new to you, if you've only DM'd home games before, and haven't built up um, very many people, knowing about you, finding you on the site, I think you lose maybe a touch of that visibility if you're only doing self promotion, if you don't have yourself on a site like that. But I mean, I also think that it means that you have more control over the kinds of games you play, the kinds of people who you bring into your games. You have a lot more control over a lot of aspects of it. And I think that that's something that maybe people will start to develop a following or a fan base on another site, and then sort of migrate over as they have enough regular games that they can kind of maintain an ecosystem on their own. And if you
Absolutely.
can, I mean, more power to you. I absolutely am not, I don't think there's one right way or one wrong way here. I think it's just, what you're capable of, what you can manage. And if you can manage that, the website and all of the traffic and the payments and stuff like that, cool. I do not have the like technical know-how for all of that. I'm sure I could learn, but right now it's just kind of like dipping my toes in. We'll see how it goes. But
I love it, and
I
that's
think
why,
you're probably
yeah,
right.
and that's why I was really excited to have the conversation with you, because this is, again, it is not necessarily meant to suggest that Dan is here to teach you the very way of doing
Yeah.
things, but rather I really appreciated Dan's content and just his approach in general to the TTRPG space. I found it very accessible, and so inviting you here was just two guys chatting about TTRPGs, and to be clear, you're here as a unpaid guest, so this is all a passion for you. And that's important to note. One of the things somebody mentioned something to me, and I'm saving it because I feel like it's an important discussion to have. And sorry, I'm going back in time. It came from Brian F. Irving, and essentially the sentiment was this. He mentioned that he always felt like embracing being paid for doing GM work might take some of the fun, or the that sort of, there's a plucky can do kind of attitude that kind of comes with a GM, getting all their scraps of paper together and doing the thing. Did you find that putting yourself into a space where you can, because you're running games and not getting paid for fun and all that good stuff, and this is supplementing that experience, but did you find that running games with a little coin in your pocket diminished that vibe, or sort of that whole feeling?
I mean, I would say it's like anything that I think you do that you love doing, but you're also, you have to do it because it's also an income stream. Um, I have a lot of those things. My other job is I manage a coffee shop, so I've been working in coffee for many years, and
Yeah.
I absolutely love working with a manual espresso machine. Love making drinks and stuff like that. There are days when I really don't, though, and I think
Right.
that's just the fact of it,
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with running games professionally and for a group, for like a home group. I think there are going to be days and times when you like need to do some prep and you're not necessarily feeling like doing it, or you don't want to
Right.
do the prep work. But it's, I think for me at least, the parts that I enjoy about it definitely overcome the parts that I think I would get tired of. And I think, a little bit further down the chat stream, I think Brian F. Irving did mention that, been publishing RPG material and for money, I assume, and hasn't taken the fun out of that. And I definitely agree, when I get into the headspace of like creating a story or creating a new mechanic or something like that, I can get lost in it pretty easily, and I sort of can forget that I'm doing it for maybe a paid game instead of my home game. And I think the nice thing about it is that I can use a lot of the stuff I use in a pro game in my home games too. Like these things are versatile. So if I can like convince my brain to sort of think about things in a slightly different way,
Yeah.
I think that's great too. I think like anything, you're going to have times when it's, you'd rather be doing something else. But hopefully those times are way fewer than the times that you're glad to be playing games.
Absolutely. That is really a great way to think about it, that you're putting together, assets and opportunities to improve the games you do for fun. But I'm with you, Faye. Faye says, if I could live off bartering, I totally would. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And Jay Gray mentions just not being a big fan of capitalism. I'd like to be paid in that it offers, opportunities to eat and pay rent on a domicile and all of that stuff. But I really do see the initial concern about like, oh gosh, am I doing something against the code of tabletop role playing game GMs? And also, I think that it can be like with most things, we can become burdened with a lot of tasks and things that are associated with our things that we love. And it can be very difficult for us to stop for just a minute and say, wait a minute, I am a pro GM. I'm already a pro GM. I'm good at what I'm doing. I love it. I can tell a great story utilizing the tools, and then also uh, bend those tools to serve a better storytelling experience for people. I mean, that again, as I was saying earlier in the program, that is that's some pro storytelling. That's just it's remarkable, and it's something that GMs do on the regular. And some folks are, I'm thinking of Alex Thomas, who's the line lead, the line developer for Mutants and Masterminds. Alex is forever running 80,000 games. He loves it, and he's one of the hardest working people in the TTRPG space because he is all at once a big fan of the work that he's doing and a professional creating that work for other people to do. And so it is remarkable to kind of see that. And I think now, while we all know Alex is just a little on the obsessed side when it comes to providing, being a GM and for Mutants and Masterminds, it's remarkable to see. And he says, "Oh man, that's a call out. I know I'm a pro GM, but I often don't feel it." And that's the thing. That's for you. That's for everybody. Faye. That's for you. That's for everybody who is. I love. Rain's talking about being engaged in this process and loving to see that professional GMing is coming around to being a space that is more embraced and less sort of like, I wouldn't even say there may be some people that are actively aggressively shunning pro GM stuff, and I believe me, as a well and truly I'll say immersed member of the TTRPG community on the pro side, and my job is to work with fans directly. I know that tabletop role playing gamers have some passions. And yeah, right. Claude says,
Yeah.
Alex, no such thing as a one-shot Thomas. No, exactly. But yeah, I mean, that is the reality. They are going to nail themselves to the cross of an issue that is very important to them, and it's at times those issues are, I think of vital importance when it comes to the culture and what consumers should suffer and what they should be expected to kind of endure from publishers, but also the gaming space is diversifying, and there are some people who are maybe a little set in their ways, very specific to D&D is only this, or playing an adventure game engine game you must only do these things, when very clearly on the adventure game engine side I'll speak to, because I'm not as familiar with D&D, but that our games are meant to experiment and play and have fun and to change and evolve and become different. And so there, and I in this particular argument, and I don't want to kind of put anybody in a particular category, there are folks who don't care to do online specific TTRPG experiences, and I understand it. I mean, there is a difference. I will tell you that it is at the very beginning of this process of sort of embracing what it meant to do digital play as a result of COVID. There was a real resistance and a confusion as to how these things even work. Like, how do you do this stuff on Discord, or how do you do this stuff, through a service? And there weren't a lot of great answers. There were some people doing some wonderful stuff and plenty of wonderful TTRPG communities in the Discord space. But without the context of COVID, it really made it difficult to kind of put together some amazing tools. As we're getting to the last part of the show, talk to me about your list, Dan. And again, this is just your list. In no way is mentioning the product and endorsement. You're not getting paid for it. And if they turn out to be awful human beings, your mileage may vary. But what are some tools you recommend to kind of help keep everything together?
The tools that I have used, and honestly, I'm always expanding the tool set. I'm always changing things that I've always used because I find a better option. Discord, like I said, Kenku FM seems very cool right off the bat for music and stuff like that. I am learning a little bit more from another guy I play with about the functionality of OBS for just helping to streamline the sharing of like multiple screens and things like that.
Sure.
I mean, let's see. I use Roll20 for maps, but I'm really loving all of the other like VTTs that are coming out, and I'm very eager to like play around with some more of them.
You bet.
I look at I mean, Foundry obviously is its own thing. I have not played around very much with Tailspire. I think it's a fascinating thing that maybe works for some groups. I know my groups would make themselves sick with it because the 3D rendering is not good for their motion sickness.
Oh, right. Yeah, that would be me. I would be one of those folks.
Yeah,
I see Tailspire as
yeah, so it's got your 3D rendered spaces, which is an interesting thing. And then there's one called One More Multiverse that is all like 16-bit art and maps styling, and it's also, I think, fairly customizable in terms of building out maps and stuff like that. I think for the right game, that could be very cool. One that's trying to evoke like
kind of that
JRPGs and things like that. I think that would be very cool as well to try. So honestly, like I said, I'm always just like adding things to my tool belt.
Sure.
For both, in person and online games. I mean, what's another one? Owlbear Rodeo is also very easy to use. Incredibly easy to use. So I also might have to like try and deal with some more of that a bit. Anyway, sure. I feel like there's so many things that I could keep talking about.
Absolutely.
I love 3D printed minis. There are so many cool people like making free STL files of all kinds of monsters and all kinds of cool things.
We are a long time fan of Hero Forge.
Hero Forge is great. There's all kinds of options too for gaming on printables and on Thingiverse, like incredible stuff. Awesome. You can find basically any like little token or thing that you might want for that you can just 3D print at home. Incredible stuff.
I mean, I'm with you, Ray.
I make all of my maps in Incarnate. Thank you, Gray Matter.
Great.
I have spent hours and hours on Incarnate, making the shadows just right.
I see. Oh, fantasy maps. Okay, great.
Yes, you get all your cool fantasy maps. They do world maps. They do battle maps. Like, great stuff. So good.
Awesome. Well, so listen, my friend. As is the usual for me, we get into conversation. I feel like just as we're in the heart of it, then the show is over.
I could talk about this for 6 full hours. So like, don't even worry about it.
Well, if you got the time, here we go. Let's see.
Nobody wants to hang out for that long.
All right. Listen, I appreciate you. I appreciate the time that you're taking to hang out and chat. I think that there is a lot of more dialogue to be had around this. And one thing that I'd like to do is sort of, I'm just floating it out here now, and we can talk about, availability and all that. But in addition to the folks in our community that are kind of doing their thing, we've got you, and I'm wondering if maybe in the future, kind of a panel approach to having a bunch of folks just talking about innovations in the space and very specifically how age games do, as we're kind of, running those things. And so if that's, if you're down, we can kind of, I'll ping some of the folks who've been in chat and we'll get people together and just sort of have a community roundtable.
I love that. I think there are so many interesting developments going on in the space, and I think an extended conversation would be incredible.
Well, fantastic. So I will be reaching out to folks in chat, but hey, Faye, Ray, let's see, we've got there's a few other people there. You're on that list, Dan, 100%. And so I'll send me a note to let's play at greenronin.com and we'll kind of work our schedules together. Dan, I'll include you in that conversation. Yeah. And Claude, you as well. And we'll kind of do this as a first come first serve, but we'll do it also with the understanding that this is an ongoing experience with expertise that grows and changes, and experiences that sort of encompass a lot of different lifestyles and approaches. And so we'll have this conversation, I think, moving forward. But to me, it feels like Dan, you got us up to a really awesome start. This has really been, for me, an opportunity to get to know you and for you to kind of share some of your expertise. Where can folks find you on the interweb?
Primarily TikTok, like I said. I'm the same name, Sir Dr. K, over there. I talk about a lot of D&D stuff, but also Age, a bunch of other games, because I end up kit bashing my D&D games using bits and pieces from a dozen other systems most of the time. So I'm always talking about like ways that general GMing and game playing can be changed and updated and improved.
I love it. I love the approach. I love the energy of your content is fantastic. It's very, like I said earlier, it is very approachable and accessible. So we've dropped the link in chat. Do go visit, follow, do all that good stuff. And while you're doing the liking and the following and all that stuff, make sure you're doing that for us too. Give us a like if you're wherever you are. If there's a thumb, we want that. Are there stars? Give us those. If they're whatever it is. And also make sure you're subscribed. And then do me a favor, copy the link and send it to your mom so that she can see how polite you are in chat. And I appreciate you very much, Nate. Thanks. You're great. And so with that, Dan, again, my profuse thanks. Looking forward to our future conversations. And that'll be the end of today's show, everybody. Do me a favor. Make sure you tune in on Monday. We have Mutants and Masterminds Monday, where we will be, I believe we're one more show away from the planning episode. And Dan, that's the thing where we all get together and with the community and we plan out all of the topics that we'll be discussing for about 6 months. And so that's a lot of good. It's super fun. And it is just a great group of folks. The chat is always rambunctious. Nate's see you. Yeah. And hey, friends, do me a favor and just let Dan know how much you appreciated him joining us today, and do that over on his TikTok. He'll appreciate that. All right, Dan, take care. Talk to y'all soon.
Thank you so much. Glad talking to you. Take care.